think these are kind of cute. So, my God, I live near a hospital, so it's a little crazy in terms of the sirens. I think this is like the second video I've did where there's a bunch of sirens. I'm gonna do no glasses. I wanted to come on really quick and I just wanted to talk to anybody who is feeling very jaded in the creator space, especially if you are an educator. And so, with that being said, right, you're a writer, you are someone who thinks deeply. You did that before it was a trend to think deeply. You did that before there was any audience, right? So, for starters, I know for myself, I came to the internet because there wasn't anybody that I knew in real life. There was not a space, right, designed for Black intellectuals, for individuals who are curious, for individuals who are writers, for individuals who think deeply, for individuals who care about their culture and their communities, right? I'm sure these places existed, but they weren't anything that were of access to me. They weren't of anything that was of my awareness. I think with my generation specifically, I think that we are just now sort of starting to create communities, right? Intellectual communities. And we're doing it in the way that we've never really been able to do before. But social media is a great marketing tool to let people know that you're doing the things, right? Word of mouth is important too, yes. But with social engineering, so much of our connections have been shifted to being online. And that was without choice, right? We didn't really have a choice to say, hey, we want to meet people online. Hey, we want to date online. Hey, we don't, we want to work online. We want to do these things. We didn't really have a say in that, right? And so for people who feel like, social media just is not a space for creativity, it's not a space for people to go and share their ideas and to get brand deals or whatever the case may be. Well, first and foremost, I want to say that before you get on social media, right? Before you build the thing and do the thing, I want you to ask yourself, what is my intention? Right? Is my intention to simply share my ideas with like minded individuals? I think if that is the intention and that is the goal, that in itself is very fulfilling, right? It feels good to know that there are other people who are like minded, yes, but other people who resonate with what it is that you do. For me, I feel like I have something to say. So that's why I get online, right? Even when I started podcasting, I was reading books. And so it's like when you're reading, you're generating all these ideas. Where is this going to go? Right? I didn't want to let things just sit in my mind. I also felt like I was looking at the world around me and the people around me as an African American woman. And it was like, okay, so I feel like I have something to say. I feel like if there's something I've learned, I can certainly go and share that with, someone. If I know that there's a Black woman or a Black man, wherever they may be in the world, and I've experienced things and I've come through things, and I know someone's struggling with depression, right? I can use my voice to share a word of encouragement, right? So that to me is purposeful. And I think even without compensation, that's purposeful. I think the other thing too, when I hear people, making certain critiques about the internet, aside of brand deals and things like that, is the conversations about consistency, right? So I do think in many ways social media is being somewhat transformed. When we first started the creator economy, or when we first were introduced to the creator economy, it was a lot of money in it, right? Brands were looking for people to sponsor and essentially peddle their stuff, right? It was like, we need free people, or we might pay some people, but there were disparities in regards to that, right? We know that Black content creators are not paid equally. Okay. So it was more so like it was a marketing tool for those with businesses. But for other people was really making a lot of money. It was a boom in the creator economy. It was a boom in the open market, right? We had never seen this before. And so eventually markets become saturated, right? And so, yeah, the money might not be there. So if you are wanting to do content and you're looking to generate some type of revenue and have brand deals, I would say really assess the situation. You know what I mean? Be honest about what is really available. Be honest about where the creator economy is, where it's shifted, right? Many of these brands have built lifelong relationships with individuals. And so they're pretty much locked in. You know what I mean? I think it's going to be very difficult to say that you want this to essentially replace your income, because I don't think I think that dream has changed shape, right? So that's the other thing. But I think if you are someone who really has ideas to share, and I think you genuinely enjoy connecting with people, I think social media is a great tool, right? Are there people on here that be saying crazy stuff, right? I was just scrolling. I had created a YouTube page for this, a Instagram page for my YouTube channel, Books and Good Looks underscore. Go follow me over there on Instagram. But I seen, just scrolling, there was a guy who did a podcast, and he was on there talking about hoe culture. He was like, Black people and hoe culture is the thing that brings us down. And it's like, well, you're always going to have people like that, right? You're always going to have people who essentially want to be intellectual and they want to be smart and they want to have something to say, but they don't really have any understanding or context or, intellectual capability. And I say capability because I think intellectualism is a skill, right? That can be learned, that can be acquired, that can be developed, right? Because if you're going to talk about sex work, you're going to talk about what you said was a whole culture, which is what is that, right? What is exactly a whole culture? Are you talking about prostitution? Are you talking about sex work? Are you talking, like, you know what I mean? Then you have to have some type of understanding of sex work. You have to have some understanding of prostitution. You have to have some understanding, right? And it's like, if you don't, when you don't have that, people are always going to be online just saying things. But as you know, it's one, ritualistic, but it's also very profitable to degrade Black women, Black people, Black bodies. You're going to get a large audience from that. You know what I mean? So there are always going to be those type of people who are opportunistic and who are just simply taking advantage of the market of academia, right? And those scholars being able to share their ideas with people, right? Even if they don't even really fit into that, even if they've never in their lives been studious, right? Even if they don't even love learning, you know what I mean? But I wouldn't let that discourage you. I think if anything, that's more of a reason for us to come online and share ideas for the people who do enjoy reading and who genuinely have something to say. Now, for me, I don't always get it right. And I think people, if you've studied my work, if you've looked at my body of work, right, over the years, you would see that. I don't, so I do carry myself with the level of intellectual humility because there's a lot I don't know. I don't always get dates right. But I think for me personally, it's good enough. You know what I mean? It's good enough. So it's like, I'm confident enough in what it is that I am saying. I know my intention is to enlighten and it's not to harm anybody. It's, you know what I mean? So it works for me. But yeah, I just would encourage you to keep going. You know what I mean? I think for what social media does bring, and I think in terms of our social connections, connecting with people who, I think those things are worth it. And the other thing I would say too, when you start talking about brand deals and monetization, well, I think you have to be pretty strategic in what it is that you're wanting to do and what it is you're wanting people to support, and you have to convey that. And you also have to be honest. I think it's like no different than going to school and getting a liberal arts education. It's no different than going to school and getting your journalism degree, right? The pay is pretty consistent, right? If you don't know, work in academia, researchers, depending on the researcher, it's never really been a lucrative thing. And so that's why, if you're doing this work, I do think to an extent, like I know for myself, I found myself here because I was passionate about journalism, but I knew within the American economy, I wasn't going to make any money as a journalist. I knew that for me personally, that would have required a lot of grit, a lot of time, and very little compensation. So it wasn't a pathway in which I wanted to pursue for my life, but I said, this could be a hobby. This could be a hobby. I can still take these things and take this love for learning and translate it, right, and share it with people. And I think that's enough. And so, yeah, I think if you're wanting brand deals, if you're wanting to be a guest on podcasts, I think like anything else in life, you got to be a go-getter. I don't think that, I think what we really are chasing, and I think under some of the criticisms about social media, don't get me wrong, I get burnt out and tired too, but I think some of the criticisms in regards to social media kind of come from people really desiring ease. And I don't think that ease exists anywhere within American society, right? There is no such thing as ease. You have to fight for your ease. You have to take your ease. You have to work hard to get the ease, right? So if you are someone and you're like, I'm not getting invited to come onto podcasts, you might have to actually reach out to the host and say, hey, here's my body of work. Check it out. I want to be on the Renaissance Room with Jalen Leslie. You know what I mean? Like, write me, send an email, send a DM. You know what I mean? You're going to have to be a little bit more proactive, but I don't think that the opportunities aren't there. I don't typically think with many small podcasters or even just for myself, like, I'm not at that point where I want to interview, although I think I could have people on my podcast. I would like to do that in the future. But there are certain things, certain constraints, resources, and all the things, and time and editing and all the things. But at some point, that might look differently, right? Hopefully in the future. However, when I get to that point, I'm likely going to be reaching out to certain content creators, right? Black men, Black women like myself who do this type of work, who have something to say, who want to share their unique perspective, who want to share their gifts, right? Who want to educate communities and continue to document culture with me. I'm going to be reaching out to them and say, hey, would you like to be a guest on my podcast, right? I'm not going to just be like, oh my God, I've been consistent with this type of content and no one has reached out to be on my podcast. Like, you see what I'm saying? So, in some of that critique, I just want to say, regardless of what you do in life, you do kind of have to still be proactive, even if you're on social media. Moments of virality only work if the goal was to do what specifically, right? The thing about attention is that it's free. You know what I mean? The attention is free. So it's like to get people to do something, whether that is to support, to donate, to subscribe, that's going to take a little bit more like innovation. That's going to take a little bit more of like telling people what to do once you have their attention. And I think if you're a writer, you're a commentator, and what you do is simply commentate and write, right? You converse and you write, then there really isn't room for people to go once they find your content. You know what I mean? So just keep that in mind. This is not to be cynical, but again, y'all know me. I'm very practical. We've had these conversations multiple times, and we're still gonna have these conversations. It's a bit of a not anything contrarian for the sake of being contrarian, but I have told you guys multiple times the truth about Black entrepreneurship for African American people. We've spoke about that many a times. I've spoke about the realities of it. I spoke about how it's not what it's cracked up to be. I spoke about how Instagram creates more of a illusion of freedom, and it creates aspirational taste, right? But it doesn't actually translate into real dollars that can actually support your life. So I've been very clear about that. Very clear about that. I've been very clear about that. So that's just what I wanted to get on here and say. I think your voice matters. I think for me personally, because I feel like when you say something is purposeful, I think purposeful has it's changed. The definition of purposeful has changed. I feel like I've reached a point in my life where purpose is no longer defined solely in the Christian, right, religious institutional context, right? Because purposeful in regards to a religion sense sometimes can feel like obligation, rather than something that is innate, rather than something that does breed a sense of selflessness, or cultivate a sense of selflessness, rather. Oh, breed is a crazy word. um, but I just think, if it's purposeful for you, if it's meaningful for you, I know for me it's meaningful. I keep going because, there was a point in time where African American people didn't have a say. I think even still to this day, if we're being honest, when I get hate, when I see, for example, Nolan Wells' family, and they're receiving hate mail just for speaking out about wondering what happened to their son who is dead. And I don't know if people can really can you really fathom having your child one day and then your child is gone? And yeah, it might be a moment of rage for society. Yeah, there might be some cycles of rage within the Black community, but at the end of the day, you have just experienced a profound loss, and you have to go past your child's room and realize that they're never coming back, and you have to live the next however many years of your life without your child. Do you see what I'm saying? But to receive hate crime and hate mail and things like that, like, that says a lot, all because you're speaking out, right? And so when I think about the freedom of speech, when I think about the things that Black people have had to endure, when I think about the consequences oftentimes for us simply speaking out, I think that this work is important. And that's really all I'm saying. I think that the work is important. I think that when you really take into consideration, like, everything we've kind of had to fight for and advocate for, you know what I mean? I would say your voice matters. At the very least, your voice matters. And so it's all about knowing your purpose and why you do what you do. For me, those are just my examples of why I do what I do and why I personally find the work purposeful. And if I'm not really feeling inspiration, if I'm not feeling, like I have anything to say, if I need a moment to kind of take a step back and be with my family and be with myself and all the things, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do that, but I'm probably gonna come back to it, right? But at the same time, I don't think that I am motivated necessarily by compensation. And I say that, I think that is important because, like I said, I think I said it in the podcast, but I say this all the time, business and certain outcomes are the one things that you cannot predict. You cannot control, you cannot predict. It is something that is incredibly It's very fragile. It fluctuates. It's not very consistent. So at the end of the day, you just have to know like what you're in for. And I think like even if you were a business owner, right, you still have to be somebody who knows kind of how to ride highs and lows, and has purpose in what it is that you do. Otherwise, I think you should do something else. And lastly, I would say to those who are burnt out and feeling like they want to give up on this plight is, don't put so much of it into this. Try to have a life, try to have like a career or something outside of your content creation. You don't have to quit your job and do this full time. The water is very shaky. The market is very saturated for all the reasons that I've just said in the previous part of the video. You don't really need to put all of your eggs in this one basket. I'm actually going to encourage you not to do that, right? Because, for many of us, if you're around my age, we relate to the internet as a way of a self-expression, right? We don't really relate to the internet in a way of it being solely for monetary gain. And so when you start to kind of take on those beliefs, right, that like you can make a lot of money on the internet, you're going to be profoundly disappointed. People aren't really telling you how they're doing it. You hear about a lot of courses, you hear about UGC and SEO, but I think there are some real tech nerds and some young people who really know how to crack the system and crack the algorithm. But I do believe that is a thing. And if you can't do that, that's fine. But I think at the end of the day, you are enough. I think your voice is enough. And I think what you have to say matters. If you believe that what it is that you have to say matter, if you believe that you have something to say to educate a person from depression, about their culture, and get somebody out of the bed who's battling depression, then I think it's worth it and I think it's meaningful. But always take your breaks, take your time, and just be mindful. Are you really giving to something that's giving back to you, or you don't know why you're here? You know what I mean? Because if you already had an intellectual community in real time, maybe you wouldn't have to go as hard. Maybe you wouldn't be as disappointed. Now that's just me being a little real, a little curt, a little direct. But I hope you guys got something from